In the past few years, the last link that has maintained the U.S.-China relationship has been the U.S.'s financial investment in China. The U.S. has sent $2 trillion in financial investment to China during this period. This money has only delayed the collapse of the Chinese economy, but it has caused U.S. investments to bleed. Now, Wall Street's wishful thinking has essentially cut off the supply of financial flows to China. Cheng Xiaonong, a special commentator for Radio Free Asia, recently wrote that when it comes to foreign investment, most people only pay attention to direct investment in China, which is the so-called greenfield investment for building factories and opening stores. In fact, the larger part is not greenfield investment, but financial investment. From the latest annual report of the State Administration of Foreign Exchange of China, it can be seen that by the end of 2022, the total foreign financial investment received by the CCP was $2 trillion, of which about $80 billion was before 2017, and 60% of the $2 trillion was invested in China in 2019 and 2020. At that time, the CCP was just about to ignite the Sino-US Cold War, but Wall Street was not aware of it. According to official data released by the CCP, 40% of the $2 trillion in financial investment bought bonds of Chinese companies, and the other 60% was invested in private equity funds in China. The so-called private equity fund is a joint venture agreement signed between foreign investors and Chinese startups. As partners, Western investors cannot withdraw their shares within 10 years, regardless of the prospects of the startup. Only after the startup is successfully listed can Western investors sell their equity and recover their investment and profits. A large number of startups have emerged in China in the past few years, largely because of this money. After the deterioration of Sino-US relations, the path for these Chinese startups to go public in the United States was blocked, and China's stock market has been hovering around 3,000 points, once falling to 2,700 points this year. So it is difficult for Chinese startups to go public in China or Hong Kong. As a result, the bubble of Chinese startups generated by U.S. financial investment also burst. At the peak of foreign venture capital, 51,302 startups were established in China in 2018. By the end of last year, only 1,000 were left, only a fraction of that. Of course, these financial investments by Wall Street were basically swallowed up. Recently, the Financial Times of the United Kingdom reported that foreign investors now say that China's startups are an entire industry dying before our eyes, and Wall Street has almost no hope left. Western investors now believe that the risks of engaging with China are too great, so they have begun to stay away from any investment in China. Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Associates, a well-known American investment management company keen on making venture capital in China, said in an interview with Bloomberg TV on September 18th that there are real problems in China, and that the environment in China is changing and becoming increasingly difficult. Only a small part of the company's investment portfolio is now in China. If things continue like this, the collapse of China's middle class will come very quickly. Yesterday, September 30th, I had a one-on-one consultation with a young man under 30. He said his student days went very smoothly. He was admitted to Fudan High School and later to Fudan University. However, a few years after graduation, he encountered an economic downturn and deflation. Not only did he have to work 996 hours per week, but he also had no hope of advancing. Although housing prices have fallen, they are still far from affordable. This is a huge contrast to his success as a student. He feels like a workhorse, constantly working without seeing any hope. During the consultation, I felt he was very depressed. He complained that being stuck in this deflationary era prevented him from accumulating wealth and escaping the fate of a workhorse. However, the real root of the problem is not the era itself, but the false narratives pushed by mainstream public opinion. The harvester secretly took your money and fooled you into blaming it on the deflationary era. If you don't understand this, you are likely to follow the same path as many older generations of students from prestigious schools. Deflation is not the fault of the workhorses because neither inflation nor deflation directly affects their productivity. What is deflation? Deflation is a drop in prices, such as a bun's price falling from 3 yuan to 2 yuan. For the producer of the bun, the income from selling it also drops from 3 yuan to 2 yuan. In other words, deflation means a drop in prices for consumers and a corresponding drop in income for producers. So if prices in society fall by 10%, it can be concluded that all producers' incomes will also fall by 10%. However, as my income falls by 10%, the purchasing power of the money corresponding to my income increases by 10% because prices have fallen. Thus, the decline in income and the increase in the purchasing power of money cancel each other out, and my actual income remains unchanged. The same principle applies to inflation. My income increases by 10%, and the purchasing power of money falls by 10%, leaving my actual income unchanged. The reason behind this is that money itself is merely a medium of exchange. The key to a person's perception of wealth and poverty lies in the ratio of their labor exchange with others. For example, if I earn 3 times as much as a courier, the labor ratio between us is 1 to 3. I can work for 1 hour and exchange it for 3 hours of the courier's labor, making me feel rich while the courier feels poor. Wealth and poverty are not about the absolute amount of money earned, nor are they influenced by deflation or inflation. In summary, the economy is a zero-sum game once you remove the influence of money, and the essence of it lies in labor exchange. What is currency hunger, and how can we understand it? Let me explain through a real experience from my past. After graduating from college, I worked in Japan for a while. The first thing I did upon arriving was to open a bank account. I was surprised to find that Japanese banks are closed on weekends. I asked my Japanese colleagues about this, and they explained that since everyone takes the weekend off, bank employees must do the same. I asked why banks don't encourage employees to work overtime on weekends to serve those who can't visit during the week and gain a competitive advantage. The answer was simple. No one would give up their vacation for a little overtime pay, and it would also generate negative public opinion. I noticed other similar phenomena, like the fact that there are very few breakfast stalls in Japan because no one is willing to wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning to prepare and sell food. At night, shuttle buses and snack stalls at tourist spots also don't stay open very late. In other words, even if you have money in Japan, the services you can buy are limited. I think this is likely the case in some wealthy European countries as well. When I returned to China, I discussed this with friends who had lived in various countries, and we all agreed that Shanghai has the best service in the world. For instance, in Shanghai, you can order barbecue takeout at 1 a.m., and the delivery person will bring it to your home. But in Europe and Japan, very few people are willing to work at that hour. In other words, the reason you can buy the best service in Shanghai is that the service providers are poor and need the money. The harsh truth here is that the biggest asset of the rich isn't money, it's the poor. Expectations were dashed, and Chinese stocks fell across the board. Financial experts criticized Beijing for sawing off arrows to heal wounds. On the first trading day after the National Day holiday, China's National Development and Reform Commission, NDRC, failed to release major initiatives as anticipated by the market. The 12 trillion ammunition promoted by the media fell flat. A shares pulled back after an initial surge, and Chinese stocks in the U.S. markets dropped sharply. Bilibili plunged more than 15%, while Alibaba fell over 7%. Experts criticized the Chinese Communist Party's CCP approach as sawing off arrows to heal wounds, deceiving the public into the market, which they viewed as essentially a sham. On Tuesday, October 8th, the Shanghai Composite Index and CSI 300 Index both opened high. Many Chinese investors rushed to buy stocks, hoping for major moves from the National Development and Reform Commission as hinted by state media. However, the NDRC merely declared at the press conference that it would launch a package of incremental policies with no specific supportive measures. the 12 trillion in post-holiday ammunition promoted by Chinese media failed to materialize. As a result, the stock market quickly shifted from gains to losses. Some investors lamented online, "I just bought today and I'm already losing money." While A shares closed in positive territory, Chinese stocks in the U.S. markets experienced broad declines that same day. According to public data, on October 8th, the Nasdaq Golden Dragon China Index fell over 8% at one point and closed down nearly 5%. Tiger Securities plunged over 23%, closing down nearly 20%. Among popular Chinese stocks, Mengniu Dairy ADR dropped 22.8%. Meituan ADR fell 16.5%, while Alibaba fell more than 6%, and Pinduoduo nearly 6%. Prior to this, Chinese media had hyped the 12 trillion post-holiday ammunition, and some economists had called for a 10 trillion investment plan, raising market expectations for Tuesday's NDRC press conference. According to Kailian Shi, within just 20 minutes of market opening, the Shanghai and Shenzhen stock markets saw turnover exceeding 1 trillion yuan. In the morning, the Shanghai Composite Index surged 10.13% to a high of 3,674 points. The Shenzhen Component Index rose 12.67%, and the Chinext Index soared 18.44%. However, following the NDRC press conference, disappointment spread, and by 10:40 a.m., Shanghai A shares had dropped to a low of 3,372 points. Reuters reported that during the high-profile press conference, Beijing policymakers outlined only a general plan and provided no details on the radical stimulus measures investors had hoped for, greatly disappointing the market. Previously, Song Xi'an, founding partner and chairman of China Capital, had posted on WeChat on October 4th, discussing the irrational exuberance in China's stock market. He pointed out that there is no economic theory proving that the wealth effect from a stock market boost can solve issues like deflation and insufficient demand. Veteran financial journalist Wang Jian echoed Song's sentiment. In an interview with Radio Free Asia, he compared Beijing's stock market strategy to sawing off arrows to heal wounds. He explained that although the rapier may be cut off, the arrowhead remains lodged in the body, eventually leading to fatal infection. Stock prices may rise, but without economic improvement or corporate profit growth, they will inevitably fall.